I'm glad to be here with y'all tonight. And, when Cody was talking to me earlier in the year, trying to, figure out, oh, well, what would be some other topics we could cover for this group? And I said, well, December for me is the perfect time to talk about sowing seeds because I know it's not on most of our minds yet, but we're going to be inside. It's going to be cold before we know it. It's going to be January, and all those seed catalogs are, well, they're already starting to flow in. Actually, I got two seed catalogs in the mail this week, and we're gardeners are going to be antsy to be buying some seeds. And right when we get those seeds, you're going to be really, really eager to get started. And so I thought if we talk now in December about the science behind starting seed and how we can plan to be the most successful, then that'll help us actually, or hopefully, when we start ordering seed to really know how much seed we need. If you're like me, I usually just like buy, three times as many seed as I am actually ever going to be able to plant. And so hopefully some of the strategies we're going to talk about today will help you get like a little bit better grasp on the number of seeds you need to buy, when you need to get started with planting them, and just, some tips on how to be most successful. So that is kind of how I approach the talk today. So lots and lots of interest lately in growing cut flowers in a home garden as well as for, small scale growers. And then, of course, vegetable growers. And so all of the concepts that we're going to talk about today, I just wanted you to see like how flexible they are and that they really apply to both. So we're not just talking about starting vegetable seed, or we're not just talking about starting garden seed. It can really apply to all of these. And here, just in case you're unfamiliar with what some seedlings look like, in that top left here, we've got some tomatoes growing in cell packs. We're going to talk about some of these different setups as we get into our talk today. Here we've got some squash that are coming up. You can tell the leaves are a little bigger here. And then we've got some clusters of cucumbers there. So these were pictures I took of some of my seedlings that we had going last year. You can see actually in this one, we had moved them into my dad's shop because I ran out of space in my grow room, and we just hung up some lights and hung them way down low over these, and you can see his truck back there. But it's a family affair when we're starting plants around my house. So let's just start with some tips for success. That's kind of how I outlined everything today. And so I want to start at the very beginning. I know it seems elementary and some basic things that we probably already understand, but we want to start with sterile supplies. I am not one to buy new materials every single year. So I'm not going out and buying new flats or new cell trays, to fit down in those flats. And lots of times I'm just repurposing items that I already have, whether that was an old, clear lettuce case that I got some salad in at the grocery store, or old pots from other plants that I've bought in the past. I'm always repurposing things. So we want to make sure that if we're using or getting creative and repurposing some equipment, we want to wash it before we get started. We want to wash in soapy water. And you see, we've got several little stations set up here on the trailer. We do this here at the station as well when we're starting seeds for the greenhouse. You want to start with one soapy water dip, and then you want to go into a dip where it's a 10% bleach solution. So that's 1 part bleach to 9 parts water. Then you go to your final dunk, which is just clean water to rinse things off, and you allow to dry. So we kind of have that system set up there. So soapy water, then your bleach solution. Actually, no, I said that backwards. I do the soapy water, then I do the clean water, then I do my bleach dip, and then we allow it to air dry because bleach needs to dry. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. That's the order. Soapy water, clean water, then our bleach solution and allow things to dry. And that way we know we're going to start off with really, really clean materials. We want to make sure that we get any, dirt that might be clinging on to the insides of those cell packs or the bottoms of those flats. We certainly don't want to be introducing any kind of leftover media that may harbor fungus gnats or anything like that. So we want to make sure we get those real, real clean. Okay. Here's another picture of just some cell packs. I even save my 6 packs, y'all, from year to year. I'm not buying full inserts of plastic cell packs to put into my flats. I'm just saving them. And so we've got to make sure that we are going to get those really, really clean. And I just took a picture of these. These were some that I did that process on just in my kitchen sink, right? So it doesn't have to be this huge, large scale situation. This is something you can just do right there in your kitchen when you're getting ready to start seeding. Okay, tip number 2 is that we want to start with clean media. And so I want to be real clear. Sometimes we may hear people say sterile media, and we actually don't want sterile media because if it's sterile, that means that there is no living activity in that product at all. Um, and sometimes that can actually be an advantage for us. So I don't know if this product that you see on the screen here is called ProMix biofungicide and mycorrhiza. And it costs a little more, right, than your regular ProMix, but I feel like people don't really understand what that added cell, what they're getting with that additional buy. And so I just thought this would be a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about it right here. So I want to start out by saying that that peat, right, is clean. It's harvested from bogs that don't contain weeds, seeds, or disease, or insects, or anything like that. So it in itself is clean, but it doesn't have any of these beneficial microorganisms in it. So what that biofungicide and mycorrhiza is doing is adding those in. Okay, so the biofungicide is a natural bacterium called Bacillus, and it's actually added to this mix as spores. And as those spores bloom, it coats the roots of your plants, your little baby seedlings, and it creates what they call a biofilm that helps protect those roots against diseases that cause crown rot and root rot type diseases, which are, some of the leading killers of seedlings. And if we have time, we'll talk about some of that at the end of the talk today. And the mycorrhiza, is actually a natural endomycorrhizal fungi. That's a big fancy terminology, but that is what it is. And those spores are also introduced into this mix. And as they bloom, they produce hyphae that penetrate into the root of your plant. The other are just creating a biofilm. The mycorrhiza is actually penetrating into the root and it grows inside the root cell and actually helps the plant take up nutrients and water. So it's kind of like this little added super lifeline. So can have some real benefits with some of these extra add-ons. But the key takeaway that I want you to take from this is that we want to start with media, whether it's a ProMix product or something else similar. We want to make sure that it's clean and that it's free of weed seed, diseases, and pathogens and also insects. Okay. Lots of other examples. Bacto is a great line. Miracle Grow obviously is something that we can get at garden centers. Johnny's has a really nice all-purpose mix. I think it's called a 512. So definitely lots of options on the market for making sure that we start with clean media. I would never want to start seed with media that was left over from the year before that I just stored outside without any protection or exclusion. Okay. You can just go ahead and guarantee that bag's been open, things have been introduced to it, and it is likely not going to be a super clean product. Okay. Compost, we have some other compost based products that obviously also are not sterile, but because they do contain living biota, beneficial microorganisms that are going to help with plant growth are just naturally in that compost product. But here, I just want to encourage you to buy these products from reputable dealers. Make sure that they are storing the products appropriately and that you're storing your own products appropriately. We want to make sure that it's clean and free of that weed and disease and insects. So lots of options. So after we've got our sterile supplies and we make sure that our media is super clean, for seed starting, it really needs to have a very nice fine texture to it. Okay. What we're looking at right here is a peat moss based product, and it is not fine. You can see it has lots of large pieces in it, and it's a multi-purpose for me. I don't want to have to buy a separate seed starting product, so I just put it through a sieve. I've got a 1/4 inch sieve here that I use for a lot of different garden purposes. And once this product is pushed through there, I kind of have to help it, right? Back and forth with my hands. You can see the larges that are left on the top. And I don't throw those away. I just put them back into the bucket where I've got the larger pieces, right? And some of those larger pieces are I just go ahead and mix them into my container mixes if I'm doing pots on my porch or add it to the raised bed or lots still have lots of uses in the garden, but definitely want to exclude those from our fine textured seed starting mix. And you're like, well, Celeste, why do we need a fine textured mix? Just let's stop and think a minute about the roots on these tiny, tiny seedlings, right? We want to try to make things as easy as possible for them to start growing, to break free from that seed coat, to really get rooted into the media and start taking up that moisture and nutrients. And if it's running in to big clumps of, peat moss or bark or whatever it is, that's really impeding the growth. So by making sure that we have really nice fine texture, we're just really helping them get a good start on things. And this is what the sieved product looks like. So you can see this is what we started with. Again, it's fine for multi-purpose use. We sieved it, took out the larges, and we were left with a really, really nice, fine textured media mix. Again, you can buy specific grow mixes. If you go to a box store or garden center, they're going to have, it may say something like germination mix or seedling mix, and it's likely to be very, very fluffy and to have some perlite in there, those little white dots that are going to help give it some ability to drain water because those heavy peat-based products tend to hold a lot of moisture. So still good products. Just want you to know what's available out there and that you can utilize items that you already have on hand if you want to. Okay, so let's talk about containers and then seeding in general. We're going to stay here in this zone for a little bit before we bounce back to those tips for success that we started out on. So you can see lots and lots of different ways to start things. The world is your oyster, one may say. Some of these, this is an example of some of my favorite way to start seedlings. The picture on the left here is a cell tray, and that's a 72 cell tray. That means we've got 72 individual plant cells that fit into what we call a 10-20 flat. And I know it's lots of numbers and terminology, but just in your head, know that 10-20 refers to this general standard in the green industry. It means that the flat is about 10 inches wide and 20 inches long. Okay. And if you got a 72, if you're looking to get inserts, you can put different count inserts into that one 10-20 flat, and they are going to be interchangeable. So some other numbers, if I like 72s because I feel like it gives me enough of a root ball for that plant really to hold together. But it's not as big as, say, a six-pack cell would be, right? So I can fit more plants into my growing space. So that's why I like it. But there are even smaller options out there. There's a 128, so you can fit 128 plants into one flat. There's a plug tray that'll fit 288 and beyond and more, right? So the sky's your limit. But just know that those are out there, and that's what all those variabilities mean. So it's just up to you to decide, which cell is going to fit best with the size of your seed and then the size of the transplant, how big you need that transplant to be once you set it out into the garden. Um, I really like starting with plug trays for some of our plants because they're easy to keep watered. You can put solid trays beneath them, and I really like to water pretty much all of my seedlings from the bottom up. This is going to help prevent overwatering. It also helps prevent fungus gnats because that top surface of the soil, we're allowing that to dry out between waterings. So those are some of my favorite. Another example right here in the middle, again, use whatever you've got. But this particular set was a like a cardboard, uh, cell tray essentially. And I thought it was really fun. I grew in it. It held up pretty well. I cut them with scissors when it was time to plant them out in the garden, just planted them right out and they deteriorated like into the soil. And the same goes for these peat pots over here on the right. I like to use those for plants whose root systems need to be larger and whose root systems really don't like any kind of disturbance. Pretty much anything in the cucurbit family, cucumbers, squash, watermelon, zucchinis, they are not appreciative of root disturbance. So if I tried to grow them in a teeny tiny cell tray like this, and then maybe I let them grow a few days too long and they became root bound inside that cell, when I took it out and planted it into the garden, I'm going to get a little bit of transplant shock because the roots just don't appreciate that. So if you can start with larger areas for those roots to grow in, it just kind of sets them up from the beginning for a little bit better success. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about some other techniques for seeding. So if you decide that you want to do plug trays, you can seed directly into your trays. I can't remember. I think maybe these were Cosmos, some flowers that I had seeded. But you can see here, I also prefer seeds that have coatings on them so I can see them really good. We're going to see some other examples of those as we go through here. But it just makes seeding a little easier so you don't get so much strain on your eyeballs. And you just sow them directly in there. Depending on how deep they need to be planted, these needed to be covered about a quarter inch. So I came back in and topped these with a little more soil after I got the seeds in place and gave that tray a couple taps right on the top of the table, and then it went right into our germination area. And this, you can see this particular crop had really, really good germination. You're not always going to have nearly 100% germination like you see in this picture. And so that's one drawback of seeding directly into trays, is that sometimes you may not be actually taking advantage of the all of your growing space, how many plants you could have, because you may have some plant failure as far as germination goes. So one drawback, but definitely still a technique that I like to use. And then this is another technique that I just started using about 3 years ago, and it's called soil blocking. And we could probably do a whole class on what is soil blocking and how do you make the media and all the fun intricacies about it. But just to give you a quick little overview, some of the reasons why I love soil blocking is because I can fit a high volume of plants in a very small area. This cake of soil blocks has 20 plants in it. So I can fit 40 plants in this teeny tiny styrofoam tray. I don't know, can y'all see me? I had to move my video so that I could see my screens. But this is 40 plants right here, growing right here on this tray in this soil block cake. Isn't that amazing? And so I love it for anything that has a very small seed. It's not super practical if you have large seeded crops, like say a squash or a zucchini, something, because as you push the seed down into these blocks, it kind of breaks it apart. So definitely most useful for things that are surface sown or only require light covering right here in the tops of those cells. Another main difference of soil blocking versus some of the other techniques that you might use is that we start out with a really, really moist, heavily packed media. So it's even more important that your starting media be really fine and exclude anything, any kind of large pieces. So I usually double sieve my mix for soil blocking. Um, and yeah, you want that to be just like a super wet brownie mix essentially. And I have a little handheld blocker, and you just move it back and forth until you fill that blocker device up with that media. Bring it over to your tray and just pop it right out. Push that little plunger down, and they just pop right out. And I just cannot explain to you how satisfying it is to have these beautiful little cakes of soil that look like, or soilless media actually, that look like little brownie cakes. And then again, you just seed directly on top of them. And then you treat them the same way that you would any of our other seedlings as far as light and heat and all those things. We're going to talk about that here in a minute until you end up with your end product. And I would say those are baby seedlings. And here's some good examples of big seedlings. These are too big. I should have planted those a long time ago, but they're fine. These are snapdragons. And I'm just actually going to come in and pinch these back, like way back, until they're only about 2 or 3 inches tall. And I'm just going to go ahead and plant these. They love the cold weather. They're a cool season, cold hardy annual. And then I'm actually going to take these tops and root those in some water. And then in about 3 weeks, I'll have another batch of what we call late winter or very, very early spring seedlings to go into the ground. So lots of fun to be had with soil blocking. Okay, another technique is what I like to call a channel or row seeding. And you can do this on a large scale. I'm going to show you a picture in a minute, or you can do this on a small scale. This is just one of those lettuce boxes that I had mentioned before. Okay, they're clear. I came and cut some slits into the bottom. That way I could have some drainage. And then I put it on top of one of these trays. So you can see there's a white tray underneath it. Because again, for all my seedlings, we like to water from beneath. Okay, we don't want to be watering from the top and disturbing them while they're trying to break through that seed coat and get those tender roots established. So the way that I find is easiest to control that moisture level is through bottom watering. So what we do here is come through and I just make little channels. I use a pencil or my finger or whatever, and you can seed. I think I have 1, 2, 3. You can see these different types of seed. 3, 4. These are so tiny you can't see them. 5, 6. I have at least 6 different um, types of plants growing in this teeny tiny little lettuce box. And you just sprinkle them, seed them really, really densely. Of course, you're going to have to follow your label requirements as far as depth goes. You may need to come back and cover some of these and leave others exposed. And you can see that we've done just that. See, these here in the middle had to be covered, these had to be covered, those had to be covered, and everything else was left exposed. And so you're like, well, that's good in theory, Celeste, but show me what it looks like once it gets growing. So I popped the lid back on top of my lettuce box because humidity is very, very important as we are getting plants through their germination. It's not quite as important after they get popped up, but very, very important for ensuring that we have a nice, even germination. And so you can see the inside of this container is doing some sweating. It looks moist on the soil surface. We've been watering from beneath, so things are looking good. Things have started to germinate. You can even see the teeny tiny ones starting to um, pop out of their seed coats. Even over here, you can see some beginnings of some activity happening. And then those on the far right that we had to plant deeply, you can see them pushing up from the soil there. And this is what it looked like even, just a few days after that, I think I took those on 1 week intervals. Things were starting to get dry. So, with our bottom watering, as the plants were growing, it wasn't able to keep up with the moisture. So, at this point, we just went ahead and took that humidity dome off. And I'm going to show you what happens next. I know some of you may be more interested in vegetables, so I tried to throw in my vegetable pictures as well. I have lots of flower starting pictures, but plenty of vegetables also. If you're not familiar with what these are, this is what seedling tomatoes look like. And I have a specialized seeding tray or road channel, just depending on where you're trying to buy your materials from. They may call them different things, channel cedars or rose cedars, something like that. And this is how, we've grown our tomatoes for years and years through this channel technique. And then you say, okay, well, that's great, Celeste, but how do we get them into their pot that they're going to grow on in? And so we've have to do a little work from here, and we just gently lift them by row, okay, or by channel, depending on what technique you've used, and you just gently tease those roots out. And I'm going to say that not every seed is going to respond to this seeding method. Remember those cucurbits we talked about? They don't like root disturbance. This isn't going to be great for them. Let's think about some plants that have tap roots like carrots and cilantro and dill and anything in that Apiaceae family. They are not going to like this, okay? They want to be planted in place. That's why we usually direct seed them in the garden. But we just want to tease these roots out, and then we don't want to let the seedlings get too big. This is most easily done when they are smaller. So maybe when they just still have their cotyledons, or maybe when they have just grown their first true sets of leaves, is the time where we want to aim for pulling these seedlings up and teasing those roots out. Here's another kind of up close image of what that might look like. And then we're just going to prick them, is the term that people use. We're going to prick them into their container. Maybe if they're very small seedlings, I've pricked into soil blocks before. I just use a little toothpick and I poke a hole right down in the middle of that soil block, and I wish I had a little video of it, but I lay the seedling over the hole that I made. Maybe you can see me. And then I take my toothpick and I just gently, not hard, push the end of that seedling down into the hole, just like that. I just go zoop, and it stands right up. And that's all you have to do. You don't even really have to firm in. You could use your little toothpick if you wanted to, right at the base of the stem, and firm it in a little bit. But you can do this into anything. You can prick them into old containers. You can prick them into 6 packs. You can even prick them into those larger plug trays. And I do that a lot to help ensure that I'm utilizing all of my growth space for, especially on plants that I know don't always have really great germination on their own, being direct seeded into the plug trays. Maybe I start them with this row or channel, and then I prick them into the plug trays. So lots of different ways that could look. Now I want to talk a little bit about some different treatments just so that we can get the best germination from the get-go. You need to really research your plants and discover if your crops are crops that are going to require light for germination. Okay. So in some cases, light is needed, and you should not cover the seeds. So for vegetable gardens, think leafy greens, carrots, radishes, beets, and lots of others. Flowers, I can think snapdragons and sweet williams are two that don't they need light, so you can't cover them. It's not that they don't want to be covered or they don't like to be covered. Like, don't cover them. Okay. Um, and uh, and this concept applies no matter what type of seeding technique you've decided on using, whether it's the soil blocks or the plugs or what have you. It doesn't matter. This is all about light, okay? Then hold on a second. I think I have another picture. What's next? Okay. Yes, I do have another picture. And then in other cases, light is not needed. So you could cover them, okay? That, like an example would be like tomatoes, peppers, sunflowers, zinnias. They don't necessarily need the light, so you can cover them, okay? And then there's a third class. Some require darkness, so you have to cover them. So we don't have a lot of vegetable crops that require darkness for germination, but like sweet peas, bachelor buttons, nasturtiums, those are all edible. Um, but they are going to require darkness. So just becoming familiar with the needs of your plant and make sure that you are providing those is really going to help you a lot in the long run. Another thing I want to throw out here at this point is that we need to be conscientious of seeding depth. So let's go back to that tomato and pepper example. They don't need light to germinate, right? So that means we can cover them, but the seeds are very small. So do you think we're going to cover very small seed with very much media? No. Generally speaking, small seed are planted more shallowly and larger seed are planted more deeply. That's a rule of thumb. I'm not going to say it's a hard and fast rule. It's just a rule of thumb. So always make sure that you do the necessary research for that. And in this picture, you see the little crumbles that I have on the tops of those soil blocks. This is vermiculite, and I use this quite often, especially for seeds that need light to germinate. So I don't want to put more of that soilless media product on top of the seeds that I just direct seeded right on top of those cakes, but I don't want them to dry out. I want them to stay moist. I want them to retain that moisture, which is so important for our very small seedlings. We talked about that as far as the humidity goes. So sometimes I put the vermiculite on top, and vermiculite soaks up moisture and just allows it to be available. So I feel like it really helps with that humidity issue when they're super small. So I mean, it's not a necessary thing. It's just a neat trick that I've picked up along the way that I like to utilize. So if you wondered what that was, I'm not using the vermiculite to cover up the seed. I'm using it as a light covering to help retain moisture. Okay, a little bit more about planting depth. Here's a great example of larger seeds and how they really require a deeper planting. Sweet peas, they really need to be about an inch or an inch and a half deep. So I only filled my cells about half full. I placed my seed in there, and then I came back and backfilled on the tops of my trays and just gave them a couple pats there on top of the counter, and we were done. And that way I'm not having to poke holes and shove seeds down. I just fill the tray minus the amount of media that I know needs to go on top. I put the seeds on and then I cover it. Okay. I mean, you can do however you like. That's just how I find it easiest. So whatever, there are a couple other germination treatments that I just want you to be conscientious of because you might have been trying to start some particular type of seed for a long time and been unsuccessful with it and just had no idea that they required a little extra help on the front end. And one of those treatments is called scarification. So this is the actual scarring of that seed coat, and is very, very helpful for seeds that have hard seed coats that are difficult to break through. Okay. So you could do this a couple different ways. I know folks who like to do it multiple ways all at the same time. Um, but the way that I'm using here for these sweet peas is I'm just soaking them in a warm water for, I don't know, about half a day or so, just to soften up that outer seed coat. I know some folks who like to use fingernail clippers and they'll just kind of nip the edge of that seed coat just to give an opening, make it so when that seed takes in moisture, once it's planted, it's a little easier to break through for that first root to break through. So lots of different ways. Also using a sandpaper. I've known some folks to kind of use sandpaper and rough them up that way. So lots of different techniques, but just know that if you've been unsuccessful with the seed and you have noticed that it has kind of a tough seed coat, scarification may be what you're missing. Okay. We've got two other terms that I want to cover because I feel like people get them confused and they say, well, I made sure that they were cold for a while and they still didn't come up right, right? So there are two different terms. One's called vernalization and the other is stratification that folks get confused pretty regularly. So vernalization is the need for a plant, a seed, to experience cool temperatures. Uh, well, for the plant to experience cool temperatures before it will initiate flower development. Okay. Not all plants need that. That's from a plant aspect. Okay. Stratification is the need for a seed. Okay. Not the plant, just the seed to experience both cool temperatures and moisture before it can break dormancy and initiate germination. So people get those two things confused and they think just because, vernalization for plants means they're outside and they're, being cold before they initiate flowering, that equates over here to the seed world where they can just pop the seed into the refrigerator and say that they provided that cold period. Stratification actually is twofold. It requires not only the cold, but that moisture aspect in order for those seeds to initiate germination and break through their dormancy. Okay. So I know a lot of people who store their seeds in the refrigerator. The primary benefit to storing your seed in the refrigerator is to help regulate fluctuations in humidity. Okay, it doesn't really have anything to do with the temperature. A long-term seed storage is done in a freezer, right? And that's a whole nother thing that we don't have time to talk about today. But a lot of people will say, "Well, I've stored the seeds in the refrigerator and they're still not doing right," and it's because they were missing that very important aspect of including the moisture. So, how do we do this? How do we make sure that the seeds are getting the proper stratification? Lots of different ways you can do it. I've used paper towels before and just moistened that paper towel, wrung it out real good. For teeny tiny seed, spread those seed on the paper towel, put it inside a plastic bag, and pop it in the refrigerator. So that's one way. I've also used sand where I've moistened the sand. You don't want it wet. You don't want it, leaking water. You just want a moist sand. And I've mixed my seed into that sand. Again, put it in a plastic bag, popped it in the fridge. Um, I've also just used whatever the potting media is that I'm starting seed on. Um, uh, and done the same thing. Moistened that potting media, that soilless potting media, incorporated my seeds, and then put them in the refrigerator. The only thing with that is they're a little harder to see. So if you were doing any kind of technique where you needed to be seeding one plant at a time, it would be easier if you used something like that, that wet sand, approach because you could see your seeds and pick them out of there. But if you're just going outside and direct seeding things into the garden, then easy peasy, that part doesn't matter quite as much. But lots of different ways to achieve the same outcome. And then you're like, okay, well, that's great. Well, what do I do then when it's time to plant them? Here's a fun example. I just cut my paper towels up into teeny tiny squares one time and put them in these trays. It worked great. Okay. Also, I've just gone and laid them out into my garden bed. And that was my direct seeding outdoors into the garden. Here, I've just sprinkled that sand on top of the potting media. And, as we watered these, that sand just settled in. We got good media to seed contact, and germination was excellent. This is how the picture at the beginning of the slideshow was seeded, the one that had all the teeny tinies growing in that little cardboard sealed tray. That's how we got started there. I don't know what I just clicked something. Oh no, what happened? Are y'all still there? Are y'all here?
Yes. Yeah, I am.
Okay. Can you still see anything?
I see your screen. It is not on presentation mode.
Okay. How about that?
Okay, hold on a second.
I can see,
There,
I can
there it
hear, I can
is.
Okay.
see.
There it is.
Okay, good. I don't know. I clicked some kind of button and like some kind of timer popped up and I was like, well, I don't want to look at that timer. Um, and so now I've got to go back. Oh, there we are. Good. We're right on time. So now we are getting back on track with some of those tips, going back to our tips. We talked about all those different types of containers we could start seeds in, different techniques for seeding them. But now we're talking about tips for going back to those tips for success, getting back onto that train of thought. So, after we make sure that we start with our sterile equipment and we've got our fine textured media that's clean and we've done all of our research and we know how deep our seeds need to be planted and we know if they need light, we know if they need a cold treatment or not. Now we're ready to move forward. So we've got the seeds planted. Whew! That was a lot of information, right? But we've got our seeds planted and now we're picking up at this part of the story. And the first thing that I want to talk about is heat mats. Okay. So I used to not use heat mats and I had adequate germination. Things were fine, but I had inconsistent and uneven germination. So maybe in a flat, I had 20% of them come up one day and then the other 20% didn't come up for 4 more days and then the last bit of it didn't come up until like a week later. So now I'm trying to manage lots of different stages and sizes of seedlings in the same growing space, and that's difficult. So when we use heat mat, it really helps us get an even, consistent germination. I say that I generally have 90% of the plants germinated within like a 3 or 4 day span, which is wonderful. It really, really helps with managing that crop as it grows on. A couple tips. I mean, you can start with just this small tabletop size. This is the perfect size for one of those 10-20 flats to fit on. You go to the greenhouse and buy a flat of plants. They're going to fit perfectly right here. They also have some larger versions, and my husband sweetly got me one for Christmas a couple years ago, and I used the bottom rack of my seed starting rack to have the heat on because they only need the heat for germination. You don't have to continue to keep them on the heat, right? Once you get to 90% germination, go ahead and take them off that heat mat because it's not really providing lots of benefits at that point. Okay. Now, a heat mat can generally raise the temperature of your soil. I don't know. Uh, you'll see resources that say like 10 to 20 degrees above ambient temperature, like that's the temperature of the air. I'd say it's probably closer to 10 degrees, right? So that's how much you could look at increasing the temperature of that soil media from your ambient, especially if you're just using one of these smaller units. When you get to these larger units, the majority of them come with a thermostat, and you can see there's a little thermometer that I've stuck right into the media right here that feeds right into the thermostat. And I can set the thermostat at the temperature that I want that mat to be. And well, at the temperature that I want the soil to be, and it will continue heating the mat until this thermometer reads, right, that temperature. So that's really nice if you can get a heat mat that also has that thermometer and thermostat on it. So let me give you a couple quick numbers. So 75 to 90 degrees is our ideal range for the majority of seeds. If we are talking about cool season vegetables, right? Things that we're going to plant in early spring or things that maybe we're planting in late summer so that we can get a fall, early winter crop. Those types of veggies prefer to be started in the low 70s and then grown on in 60-degree temperature. Okay. So the soil, they prefer to have a warmer soil to get them started. But then once they're germinated, they want to grow off in those cooler temperatures, which makes sense. They're cool season veggies, right? Warm season vegetables, the majority of those are going to be in the 70s range, so 70 to 80. Tomatoes, particularly, their sweet spots like right around 78. They like it really, really warm. And then they like to continue to grow off in warmer temperatures, okay? So you don't necessarily have to keep them on a heat mat, but I guess you could, right? You just have to work and know what the temperature in your growing space is, what that ambient temperature is. And then watermelons are those that prefer the warmest soil temperatures. So they're going to do best like 80 to 85 with that soil temperature to really get the best, even, consistent, fast germination from them. Okay. Here's a picture of what that thermostat looks like. So, I just want to, even if you don't have a thermostat, just get like a meat thermometer or something, cheap you can get from Walmart and stick it into your soil and just monitor it, right? You can tell, it's going to be able to tell you what the temperature of that potting media is. And if you're wondering, you're like, gosh, why don't I have good germination? Why isn't anything coming up yet? And you look on there and it's like 67 and you're trying to germinate tomatoes, that's not cutting it, right? So maybe you need to find ways to warm that soil up even more. I don't think that I mentioned that you need to have something solid underneath these mats. So that might be a problem. If you have a heat mat and it's not getting the heat that you expect it to be, make sure that it's on a solid surface. So this rack beneath this is a wire rack, and I put down like, it's not a plywood, but it's like a really thin laminate wood surface so that it can have that contact. Another thing that you could do is add an insulating layer between your solid surface and your heat mat, like a big towel or something like that, and that could help you retain heat as well. And in the other direction, if your media is too hot, if you have it on your heat mat and you don't have a thermostat, so you can't control the heat manually, we're going to have to find some ways to adjust that. So, like if you got a little wire baking rack, you can put that on top of your heat mat and then set your seedlings on top of that wire baking rack. Okay, so now you've got a little, inch or so of insulated air space. And so you're still going to be getting the heat off of the heat mat, but not quite as much. So definitely things to look for and ways to work with it. Okay. My next tip for success is to use supplemental lighting. And if you've ever tried to grow plants indoors and been unsuccessful, I'm like 95% sure it was probably because of the light. So you can tell in this setup, and this is a setup that I kind of mimicked mine after as well. Even with this setup, with all of this light, we're still getting bending and stretching of our seedlings. And that means that they are not receiving adequate light. So in this case, how could we address this? Okay. The first thing that we could do is lower these chains so those lights become closer to the plants themselves. That's going to increase light intensity, which is really important. We're fixing to get to that here in a minute. And on the opposite side of that coin flip, if you have seedlings that are staying super, super short and they're not elongating properly, as you would feel like they would need to, you may need to lift that light up, and reduce that light intensity just a bit to allow those plants to elongate. So if you have stretching, on the outside edges of your plants or your whatever tray or setup you're using, it's because you don't have that adequate light intensity. Okay. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Okay. So here is a good starter kit. You can see that little one tray seedling mat that I had. And then this is a tabletop LED grow light. Okay. Actually, it's not a grow light, it's a seed starting light. And we're going to talk about the difference of that just here in a minute. But this is a great little setup if you just want to small scale start some of your own home vegetable garden seeds. You can tell I put a towel down here so that the counter didn't steal the moisture, I mean the heat from my heat mat, and it worked wonderfully. And you can even adjust how high this light is right down here at the feet. So you can pull it out and spread those legs apart, and you can get the light closer or further away depending upon how you want to approach it there. Now, if you want to step up a little more than that, that was fun. We learned how to do it, but now we want to kind of scale things up a bit and grow some more seeds. You may be looking into getting some larger types of lights. And the next question I always get is about like what type of light or bulbs should I be using? And then I follow up with the question, does it really matter? Okay. So if we were going to grow these plants all the way to maturity, it would most definitely matter the type of light that we're using, okay? So that's our quality of light, our wavelength. That's going to matter. But thankfully, for seed starting, it's simplified and it's more about quantity of light or the intensity of that light over the quality of light, okay? So intensity is measured in photons. I know that sounds really sciencey. Well, I'll try not to go there today. Um, and quality is measured in like wavelengths. Okay. So that picture on the top right, that is an actual grow light. And this particular grow light is giving off, it looks kind of purplish, right? You can see the color that it's putting off, but that's because it's providing the full spectrum of light in both blue and red spectrum wavelengths. Okay. You can see how they alternate those bulbs along that ballast there. So that's a true grow light and would be perfect for growing a plant all the way through maturity, making sure that the plant is responding properly and doing photosynthesis, making all the things it needs to make. Okay. But for just starting plants, we don't need the full spectrum of wavelength. What we're concerned with at this point is that intensity of light. Okay. So, again, light intensity is measured in photons, and most of the time, our bulb options are not always going to tell us what the photon ratings are on the box, but some will. So, the code that you want to be looking for is ppf. Okay, that's telling you what the measurement of the photon intensity is. Okay, so the grow light at the top, for example, does have it listed on the box. It has a ppf rating of 72, which is completely sufficient for home growing. Okay, commercial setups are going to have something that's more like 1,000 ppf, okay, or even more in some cases, depending on what the crop is, if they have any natural light, coming into play. But for home seed starting, 72 is perfectly fine, okay? So I don't want you to get too caught up in the numbers of everything, but I do want you to realize that you have some control over that intensity. If you get stretching, you can lower the light, that increases the intensity. If you don't have adequate lengthening, you can raise the light, and that's going to reduce the intensity. So that's completely up to you, okay? Um, what else do we want to say about this? Also, yes, I do want you to keep in mind that the sun outcompetes all other light sources. Okay. Even on a cloudy day, a rainy, cloudy day, the ppf on a rainy, cloudy day for natural light is still like 300 or 400. That's so much more than we could ever provide with indoor supplemental lighting. Okay. So if you are growing in a greenhouse, you're not going to need supplemental lighting unless, you're trying to grow maybe like underneath a bench or somewhere where that natural light is being impeded. I always want to make sure that people realize that, you don't have a greenhouse and an artificial supplemental grow lights set up at the same time. Other options as far as bulbs go are LED. That's what we're looking at right here. This was that small T4 bulb that you saw in the tabletop setup. And then even fluorescent bulbs or, most of the shop ballasts that you buy, the shop lights that you buy now, the bulbs themselves are also LED. This was just a picture of an old fluorescent bulb, but you can get this type of bulb, this setup also in LED lights as well. And they will all work for starting seed inside. There was a picture of my first attempt at upscaling from my tabletop version. My husband built that for me. And then after 1 year of that, I said, I need more. And so we ended up with this situation. And let's see, we've got one, two, three. I actively grow on three levels, and the bottom row is what I use for my heat mat. So this is where all the germinating happens. And as soon as my plants get about 90% germination, I take them off heat and I move them up onto one of these top two tiers, and then I put more down on the bottom. And another thing that's going to make your life a lot easier with this indoor growing is to use a timer so that these lights come on and go off all on their own. You don't have to remember to turn them on before you go to work and then remember to turn them off before you go to bed, or, you fell asleep on the couch and you woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and the lights ran like 6 hours longer than they should have. So, lots of flexibility there if you just go ahead and set yourself up with a timer. And then here is a fun image of how much fun you could be having in February and March once you get all of your babies germinated and growing off like they should be. It's just really satisfying, and I hope that this discussion today has inspired you and given you a little more confidence in starting seeds and avoiding some of the pitfalls that you might encounter, and how to plan for the future. And I had one slide that got out of order, and it's about humidity and moisture. So um, after we talk about heat, after that supplemental lighting, I always keep either a humidity dome or just saran wrap over my seedlings as they are germinating. And once you get to that, 6, 7, I usually wait till about like 70 or 80% germination. I leave this plastic on there, okay? That high humidity is just so, so important to really get a nice, even, consistent germination on your full trays. And then I take that off. That's not something you leave on for the duration of growing. Just like the heat mats, once you get them popped up, you take off your humidity and you take them off the heat, and you're good to go. So, with that, I'm going to end there and let y'all ask any questions if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, so if
I
anyone
can't
has any
believe
questions, put them in the chat or feel free to unmute and ask some questions.
I'm always surprised when I can talk for a whole hour just about starting seeds. And there's more slides. I could have kept going. But we're gonna stop there. It might be fun at some point to have a class that, because I wasn't even gonna address this today, but helps talks about planning, like your calendar, knowing when you need to get things in the ground, and then being able to go backwards and calculate when you need to start seedlings. If you wanted to start your own transplant, sometimes that can be a little confusing, but we could do a fun talk on that at some point if y'all wanted to.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay, let's see. Let me go to the chat.
I haven't seen any questions pop up.
I haven't. I can't believe y'all don't have any questions. Look at these beautiful little baby plants. Don't y'all want to grow some of those? Has anybody ever grown soul blocks before? I'm going to pull one off so you can see. One plant with this teeny tiny block of soil. And look how beautiful. It's thriving. They're fun. Okay, well, I I would feel bad if I let y'all go and I didn't put in a plug for the Pick Tennessee Conference. It's coming up in January, and is going to be in Lebanon. And if you are considering, you know, small scale commercial anything as far as growing plants, this is the conference that you really want to go to. We have a full tract of cut flower production, a full tract of fruit, a full tract of veggie. There is a dedicated track for agritourism. There is one committed to veteran farmers. Christmas tree growers, a full track for Christmas tree growers, and a full track for apiculture. So, bees. And I feel like all those topics like fit in so well with this stakeholder group of, homesteading, small scale farming type situation. So if that is something that interests you, it's a 3-day event just filled with education, and it's going to be really fun. And so make sure you check us out. Just Google Pick Tennessee Conference 2026 and it'll pop up. Registration's open. I think you can still get the early bird registration fee. I don't think that is turned off yet. So I hope to see y'all there.
There was one person that asked, "Are the heat pads safe?"
Yeah, yeah, they are safe. So they're not going to burn you. Like if you touched them, like they're not hot like that. Um, it's uh, a radiant heat type of situation. Does that make sense? I
Oh,
would be more concerned about the lights getting hot than the heat mat getting hot, like hot enough to burn anything.
right. Well,
And again, I'm keeping those heat
oh,
mats usually around
she was
70.
worried about possible fires.
Oh yeah, no, 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 no. Not with these heat mats. And again, I'm keeping my heat mat like usually right around 75 because I just like to pick a number and stay in the middle, you know? So if I pick 75, I know I can get my warm season up. And if it's a little too warm for my cool seasons, I'll just pop a little baker's rack underneath it to create that little bit of airflow. Yeah, you can get them on Amazon. I ordered mine from the Gardener's Workshop. I like to get a lot of my seed starting stuff from there. So the Gardener's Workshop, Gardener's Tool Shed is another good one. Amazon has them. They even have them at like garden center, like box store garden centers now. So Lowe's, Home Depot, stuff like that.
All right. Well, if that was everything that everyone had, I think Celeste, that was a great job. I think that was a really good presentation. Sorry about being kind of off there. I had a phone call that came in, so I was
I
trying to take
know.
care of that.
That's completely fine. Yeah, my husband tried to call me in the middle of this, and I was like, ignore.
All right. Well, thank you all for
Um,
joining us, and I will send out the YouTube link tomorrow once I get it uploaded. That way, everyone can go back and watch it if they've got any questions whenever it comes time.
Okay, they can listen to me just talking and being silly all over again.
Thank you, Celeste.
You're welcome.